Look at you. The maid's toddler pointed. The fiancé was shocked while the billionaire watched. Hey, listen. A 3-year-old little girl walked into the most expensive ballroom in Chicago, barefoot, with paint on her tiny fingers, and pointed directly at the most beautiful woman in the room. She didn't say a sentence. She didn't say a paragraph. She said just 3 words. And those 3 words, they ended an engagement. They exposed a secret that had been buried for 2 years. And they made a 32-year-old billionaire drop to his knees. Right there. In front of everyone. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because nobody expected the truth to come from a child who wasn't even old enough to tie her own shoes. Stay right here. Because this story, you will not forget it. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today, because what I'm about to share with you is one of the most emotionally powerful stories I have ever told on this channel. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments right now. I love seeing how far this community reaches. What you're about to hear is a story about innocence, betrayal, hidden truth, and the kind of love that survives even the darkest storms. It is heartwarming. It is shocking. And by the end, I promise you, it will change how you look at the people around you. Are you ready? Let's go. Sometimes the people we overlook the most see the most clearly. Her name was Rosa, 34 years old, quiet as a morning before sunrise, and invisible in the way that only the truly hardworking ever become. She cleaned the marble floors of the Hargrove estate in Lincoln Park, Chicago, a home so large it had its own name. Hargrove Hall. 7 bedrooms, 4 sitting rooms, a ballroom on the lower level that most people only saw in magazines. Rosa had worked there for 3 years. She arrived at 6 in the morning and left at 7 in the evening. She never complained. She never asked for more than her paycheck. She brought her lunch in a small brown paper bag and ate alone in the kitchen corner while the rest of the staff chatted around the big table. The reason Rosa kept to herself wasn't shyness. It was Lily. Lily was Rosa's daughter, 3 years old. Curly brown hair that never stayed combed. Dark, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything. Every color, every face, every feeling in a room. Like a little camera that never stopped recording. Because Rosa couldn't afford daycare, not on a maid's salary, not in Chicago, she had quietly arranged with the estate's head housekeeper, a kind older woman named Mrs. Patterson, to bring Lily along on certain days. Lily would sit in the small supply room off the kitchen, surrounded by coloring books and small stuffed animals, while Rosa worked. The owner of Hargrove Hall, Mr. Ethan Hargrove, had never officially approved this arrangement. But he had never officially disapproved of it either. He was rarely home during the day. At 32, Ethan ran Hargrove Capital, one of the most successful private investment firms in the Midwest. He was sharp, serious, and moved through life with the focused energy of someone who had been taught from birth that time was the most expensive currency. He was also, as of 6 months ago, engaged. Her name was Victoria Calloway, 29, blonde, the kind of beautiful that stopped conversations and started them again. She came from old Chicago money. The Calloway family had been in real estate for 3 generations, and she wore her status like a second skin. Perfectly tailored. Always fragrant. Always composed. The staff at Hargrove Hall had a private nickname for her. The Glass Queen. Not because she was transparent. Because if you pressed too hard, she shattered. And the shards were sharp. Victoria visited the estate nearly every day now that the engagement was official. She was planning the wedding with the kind of military precision that made even the wedding planner nervous. She redesigned 2 rooms without asking. She had the east garden replanted. She made small comments, always polite, always just barely cruel enough, about the way the staff performed their duties. Rosa had felt those comments more than once. The floors still look dull, don't they? Victoria had said one Tuesday morning, standing above Rosa while she scrubbed on her knees. Not to Rosa. To the air beside her. As if Rosa was simply part of the furniture. Rosa said nothing. She just scrubbed harder. But Lily had been watching from the doorway of the supply room. And Lily, at 3 years old, did not yet understand that some things are better left unsaid. She had toddled out into the hallway and looked up at Victoria with those wide, dark, recording eyes, and said in her small, clear voice, "You made Mama cry." Victoria had gone very still. Rosa had scrambled to her feet, heart hammering. "Lily, sweetheart, come here." But Lily hadn't moved. She just kept staring up at Victoria. Not angry. Not scared. Just certain. The way only very small children and very old people ever are. Victoria had smiled, that smooth, practiced smile, and said, "How precious." Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against Rosa's freshly cleaned floor. Rosa had pulled Lily close, whispering apologies under her breath, terrified she was going to lose her job. She didn't know then that this moment, this small, overlooked moment, was just the beginning. Have you ever been in a place where you felt completely invisible, no matter how hard you worked? Tell me in the comments, because what Rosa was about to discover would prove that being invisible sometimes means people forget to hide things from you. The truth doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives in whispers you weren't meant to hear. Spring came to Chicago the way it always does. Reluctantly, with cold mornings that pretended it was still February and then surprised you with warm afternoons that smelled like possibility. The Hargrove estate bloomed. The East Garden Victoria had redesigned was genuinely beautiful, Rosa admitted to herself as she wiped down the garden windows. White peonies and pale lavender. Elegant. Cold. Exactly like the woman who had ordered it. Ethan had been traveling more than usual in April. His firm was handling a major acquisition, and he flew between Chicago and New York twice a week. Rosa noticed his absence the way you notice a sound that stops. Not immediately, but once it's gone, the silence feels different. What she also noticed, because Rosa was invisible, and invisible people see everything, was that when Ethan was away, Victoria had a habit. A habit named Derek. Derek Calloway was Victoria's older brother. 33. Tall and loose-limbed with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no. He visited the estate on the days Ethan was in New York. Always called ahead. Always charming with the staff. Always had a reason, just dropping off some paperwork for Vicky, just checking on the renovation samples, just saying hello. But the visits were never just hello. Rosa had first noticed it in late March. She had been cleaning the upstairs hallway, the long one that ran past the private sitting room, when she heard voices inside. Low. Intense. She had paused only because she heard her own name. "The maid's kid was watching me again today." Victoria's voice. Clip. Irritated. "Kids watch everything. Vic doesn't mean anything." Derek. "She makes me uncomfortable. That child looks at people like she knows something." "You're paranoid." "I am careful," Victoria had said. "There's a difference." Rosa had moved on quickly, quietly, heart beating strangely. She told herself it was nothing. Rich people had odd conversations. She had work to do. But the unease stayed. And then came the afternoon in late April that Rosa never spoke about to anyone. Not for weeks. She had returned to the estate at 4 p.m. after a midday appointment for Lily's pediatric checkup. She had entered through the side staff entrance, which bypassed the main foyer entirely. She had expected the house to be quiet. Ethan was in New York. Mrs. Patterson had the day off. The house wasn't quiet. She heard voices from the study on the ground floor. The door was open 2 inches. She wasn't trying to listen. She was simply walking past. But what she heard froze her in the hallway. Victoria's voice. "He can't find out before the Dawson deal closes. If Ethan pulls the capital now, my father loses everything." "Everything, Derek." "Derek. Then keep him happy until June. That's 8 weeks." Victoria. "And after June?" "Was." "Derek. After June you'll have the Hargrove name." And the prenup your father's lawyer buried in that document package. Ethan hasn't even had his own attorney review it yet. Victoria. He trusts me. Derek. Exactly. Rosa stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. Then Lily tugged her hand. She'd been standing beside her the whole time, quiet as a shadow, and whispered, "Mama, why are you standing still?" Rosa looked down at her daughter. Those dark recording eyes. She pressed her finger gently to her lips. Then she walked them both back to the supply room and closed the door softly behind them. She sat on the small stool she kept in there and stared at the wall. She had just heard something that could destroy a man's life. Or save it. What would you do if you accidentally discovered that someone was being used and betrayed by the person they loved most? Would you speak up, even if it cost you everything? Think about that. Because Rosa was about to face exactly that choice. She had every reason to stay silent. She chose something harder. For 2 weeks, Rosa carried what she had heard like a stone in her chest. She cleaned floors. She polished windows. She watched Victoria glide through the estate with her wedding binders and her cool smiles and her way of making every room feel slightly smaller. She watched Ethan come home from New York with tired eyes and a warmth in his face that appeared only when Victoria was near, a warmth that Rosa recognized painfully as genuine. He loved her. He actually loved her. And Victoria knew it. And was using it like a key. Rosa thought about her own life. She thought about what happened to maids who accused billionaires' fiancés of financial conspiracy. She thought about Lily's daycare costs, about her small apartment in Pilsen, about the fact that this job was the most stable thing she had built in 5 years of hard, quiet work. She thought about all of that. And then she thought about Ethan Hargrove. Not the billionaire. Not the employer. The man she had watched over 3 years. Be genuinely kind in ways he clearly didn't think anyone noticed. The man who had once, without comment, left an extra week's pay in her envelope after she'd missed 2 days with a sick Lily. The man who remembered Mrs. Patterson's birthday every single year and bought her the same kind of lemon cake from the same bakery in Old Town because he'd learned once that it was her favorite and never forgot. That man. Rosa knew that kind of goodness was rare. She also knew she couldn't protect it and protect herself at the same time. She chose him. She wrote everything down, date, time, exact words as best she remembered them, on 2 sheets of notebook paper. She sealed them in an envelope and wrote private, for Mr. Hargrove only on the front in her careful handwriting. And then she walked to Mrs. Patterson's office and handed it over with instructions to deliver it by hand, privately, only to Ethan. Then she went back to work. She told herself she had done the right thing. She also quietly began updating her resume that night, because she was almost certain she had just ended her career at Hargrove Hall. What Rosa didn't know, couldn't have known, was what Ethan did when he opened that envelope. He read it twice. Then he sat very still in his office for 47 minutes. Then he made 3 phone calls, to his personal attorney, to his financial advisor, and to a private investigator he had used once before for a business matter. He did not call Victoria. He did not confront Derek. He waited. And he planned. And 4 weeks later, he hosted the engagement party. The one that had been on the calendar for months. The formal, official "we are getting married" party in the Hargrove Hall ballroom, with 200 guests, crystal chandeliers, champagne in tall thin glasses, and a string quartet in the corner. Rosa had not been invited, of course. She had been scheduled to work. She was in the kitchen at 7 p.m. when the party began, keeping Lily close, hoping to finish early and leave before things got too crowded. Lily sat at the kitchen table with her coloring book and a cup of apple juice, carefully filling in a picture of a butterfly with a yellow crayon. Rosa watched her daughter and felt something she couldn't name, a feeling somewhere between peace and dread. Then Mrs. Patterson appeared in the kitchen doorway, slightly breathless. "Rosa," she said, "Mr. Hargrove is asking for you." Rosa looked up. "For me?" Mrs. Patterson nodded, and her expression was complicated in a way that Rosa couldn't read. "Both of you," she said, glancing at Lily. "He said to bring Lily too." Rosa's hands went cold. She lifted Lily, who clutched her yellow crayon and looked around with bright, curious eyes. and followed Mrs. Patterson through the back corridor and toward the entrance to the ballroom. 200 people. Crystal light. The string quartet. And at the far end of the room, Ethan Hargrove stood next to Victoria, both of them watching as Rosa walked in through the side door. Victoria's face, that perfectly composed glass queen face, did something Rosa had never seen it do before. Flickered. Was Rosa wrong to bring what she knew to Ethan? Or would you have done the same thing, even knowing the risk? Drop your answer in the comments, because what happened next in that ballroom? No one expected. In a room full of powerful people, it was the smallest voice that told the biggest truth. 200 people watched Rosa walk across that ballroom. She was in her work clothes. Plain gray top. Dark trousers. Her hair pulled back. Lily on her hip in a yellow dress that Rosa had put on her that morning because Lily had insisted and Rosa had been too tired to argue. Lily still held her yellow crayon. The murmuring started softly. Who is that? Is that the help? Why is she here? Victoria stood very still beside Ethan. Her smile was fixed in place like something painted on. Her eyes, though. Her eyes moved to Rosa with an expression that was cold and calculating and just slightly afraid. Ethan spoke first. "Thank you for coming, Rosa," he said. His voice was calm, warm even, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Rosa swallowed. "Of course, sir." He nodded. Then he looked at Lily. Lily looked back at him. Children and adults who are used to being underestimated recognize each other instantly. Something passed between them in that moment, a flicker of mutual understanding, and then Lily, 3 years old with her yellow crayon, leaned slightly out from Rosa's arms and looked directly at Victoria. Her little face shifted. Not afraid. Not confused. Certain. She raised one small finger and pointed. And in a voice that carried, "God help them all," in that quiet ballroom that voice carried. She said, "Look at you." 3 words. The room went very, very still. Victoria's painted smile cracked at the edges. "Look at you," Lily said again, softer now, with a particular gravity that very small children sometimes carry, as if they are borrowing the words from somewhere older and wiser than themselves. She tilted her head. "You made Mama sad. And you tell lies." Someone in the crowd made a small, sharp sound. Victoria laughed, a high, bright, wrong-sounding laugh. "Oh, how adorable. Children say the funniest." "Victoria." Ethan's voice. One word. Quiet. Like a door closing. Victoria stopped. Ethan reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and withdrew a folded set of documents. Rosa recognized the format: legal. Formal. Dense with careful language. He set them on the table beside him without drama. "My attorney reviewed the document package your father's lawyer submitted last month," Ethan said, still in that calm, quiet voice. "Including the prenuptial agreement that was embedded on page 41. The one that grants your family's firm emergency access to Hargrove Capital's liquidity fund in the event of a marital dispute, which, conveniently, your father's company could trigger at will under the clause's language." The string quartet had stopped playing. Every single person in that ballroom was motionless. Ethan looked at Victoria for a long moment, and Rosa, watching him, saw something genuinely heartbreaking in his face. Not rage. Not satisfaction. Grief. "I loved you," he said simply. "I want you to know that was real. For me." Victoria said nothing. Her composure, that perfect glass queen composure, simply dissolved. Not dramatically. Not in sobs or shouts. It just went out of her like a light switching off, and what was left looked smaller and younger and, Rosa thought, very frightened. Derek Calloway stepped forward from somewhere near the back of the room. "Ethan, listen, this is all a misunderstanding. My attorneys will be in contact," Ethan said. "With both of you." Then he turned away from them. And he looked at Rosa. The silence in that ballroom was the loudest thing Rosa had ever heard. Ethan walked toward her. Not quickly, not with performance, and when he reached her, he looked at Lily, who was still watching Victoria with those solemn recording eyes. He looked back up at Rosa. "You could have stayed quiet," he said softly, "only for her. You had every reason to." And you didn't. Rosa's throat was too tight for words. She just shook her head slightly. Ethan looked at Lily. "Thank you, little one," he said gently. Lily considered him for a moment. Then she held out her yellow crayon. "An offering." Ethan took it with both hands, the way you receive something precious. "Would you have been brave enough to do what Rosa did? To speak the truth when staying silent would have been so much safer? Tell me honestly in the comments. The most powerful things in the world are not money or status. They are courage and kindness, and sometimes they live in the smallest people." The party ended quietly. Guests filtered out in small, murmuring groups. The caterers packed up. The string quartet folded away their instruments. The crystal chandeliers dimmed one by one as the staff worked through the rooms. Victoria left without a word. Derek followed. His easy confidence finally gone, replaced by something tight and pale around his eyes. Rosa stood in the emptied ballroom for a while, Lily dozing against her shoulder, finally worn out from the enormity of a night she would not remember when she grew up, but that had changed the shape of her life before she was even old enough to know it. Mrs. Patterson appeared at her elbow. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly, putting an arm around Rosa. "Let's get this little one to the car." 3 days passed. Rosa reported to work on Monday morning with her stomach knotted and her resume in her bag, because she still believed, deeply, practically, sensibly, that telling the truth to a powerful man about his powerful fiancée had a way of becoming inconvenient once the dust settled. She had seen it before, in other houses with other employers. She scrubbed the kitchen floor with careful hands and waited. At 9 a.m., Ethan came into the kitchen. He poured himself a coffee. He always did it himself, never asked the staff, and stood at the counter for a moment. Rosa kept working. She didn't look up. "Rosa," he said. She sat back on her heels. "Sir." He looked at her for a moment with that same expression she'd seen in the ballroom, stripped of performance, just genuine. Then he set a folder on the kitchen table. "My HR director will walk you through everything in there," he said. "But the short version is salary increase, full benefits including childcare coverage, and an official position as estate manager if you want it. Mrs. Patterson is retiring at the end of the year, and I can't think of anyone I trust more." Rosa stared at the folder. She couldn't speak. "You don't have to decide today," Ethan said. He picked up his coffee. "Take the week." He started to walk out. "Mr. Hargrove," Rosa said. He stopped. "I'm sorry," she said. "About Victoria. I know it wasn't just business for you. I'm sorry it hurt." He was quiet for a moment. "So am I," he said. Then quietly, "Thank you for telling me the truth. Not many people would have." He left. Rosa sat very still on the kitchen floor for a long moment. Then she opened the folder. The numbers on the first page made her eyes fill with tears, because for the first time in 5 years, they meant that Lily would have real daycare, real stability, the ability to go to kindergarten in the fall without Rosa lying awake worrying about how to pay for it. She pressed the papers against her chest for a moment and looked out the kitchen window at the east garden, the beautiful, cold, peony-filled garden that Victoria had designed, and felt, strangely, no anger at all. Only something gentler. Gratitude. Because if Victoria hadn't been so careless, if Derek hadn't spoken too loudly, if Rosa had taken a different route back from Lily's pediatric appointment that afternoon, if Lily had stayed home that day, if Mrs. Patterson hadn't been kind enough to allow a maid to bring her daughter to work, none of this would have happened. Goodness found its way through the cracks, Rosa thought. It always did. It just needed the right small hands to let it through. Lily had started kindergarten at a small school in Lincoln Park by September. On her first day, her teacher asked the class to introduce themselves and say one thing they believed in. Most of the 5-year-olds said things like puppies and cartoons. Lily, who had started kindergarten a year early because her mother could now finally afford the school that had room for her, looked at her teacher with those dark, serious, recording eyes and said, "I believe in telling the truth, even when you're scared. Because the truth is how things get better." Her teacher called Rosa that afternoon and told her. Rosa sat in her new office, the estate manager's office, with her name on the door, and cried quietly for a long time. Not sad tears. The other kind. The ones that only come when something inside you finally stops bracing for the fall. This story is about something that never makes the headlines. It's not about the billionaire or the betrayal or even the courtroom that followed. It's about a tired mother who chose integrity over safety. It's about a little girl whose innocence cut through every layer of pretense in a room full of powerful people. It's about the truth, that small, stubborn, unstoppable thing, finding its way through, carried by the smallest possible hands. If you have been the Rosa in your life, the person who works hard and stays quiet and hopes someone notices, I want you to hear this. Your integrity is your wealth. Your kindness is your power. And the truth you carry is never too small to matter. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It truly means the world and helps this story reach someone who might need it today. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. Leave a comment and tell me, what did Lily's words mean to you? Or share something you believe in the way Lily did. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who feels invisible, someone who is afraid to speak up, someone who is carrying the weight of doing the right thing alone, please share this with them. Because sometimes, the most powerful message someone can receive is a simple reminder. The truth is how things get better. See you in the next story.